Ah, the Galactic Federation's Interspecies Cultural Exchange Program. What a brilliant idea that turned out to be. I mean, who wouldn't want to stick a bunch of different alien species in a room together and have them talk about their childhoods? It's not like that could possibly go wrong or anything. So there I was, Jake Peterson, proud human representative and designated Deathworlder, sitting in a circle with a bunch of aliens who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Can't say I blamed them. I didn't exactly volunteer for this gig either. Our facilitator, a tall, willowy creature with iridescent skin that I'm pretty sure was 90% legs, clapped its hands together. Welcome, esteemed representatives. Today we shall engage in a delightful sharing of childhood experiences. Who would like to begin? Silence. Awkward, uncomfortable silence. The kind of silence that makes you want to crawl under a rock and die. Or in my case, makes me want to open my big fat mouth. I'll go, I said, raising my hand like the class clown I used to be back in high school. Fair warning though, my childhood stories might be a bit intense for some of you. The facilitator's eyes lit up like a Christmas tree. Wonderful. Please, Jake, regale us with tales of your youth on the death world known as Earth. I cleared my throat, trying not to laugh at the way half the aliens in the room visibly tensed up. Well, let's see. How about I start with my first camping trip? I was about 8 years old. And so began the most surreal storytelling session of my life. Picture this, I began, leaning forward in my chair. Little 8-year-old me, all excited for my first real camping trip with my dad. We're talking deep woods, no electricity, just us and nature in all its glory. I paused for dramatic effect, noticing how some of the aliens were already looking a bit green around the gills, or whatever passed for gills on their species. So there we were, setting up our tent in this beautiful clearing. Dad's showing me how to tie knots, how to start a fire, all the essential survival skills. And then, as the sun starts to set, we hear this low, rumbling growl coming from the bushes. A collective gasp went through the room. I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. Dad freezes, puts his finger to his lips, and slowly reaches for the bear spray. Yeah, you heard that right. Bear spray. Because on Earth we have these massive predators called bears that can rip a person to shreds if they're feeling a bit peckish. One of the aliens, a small, fuzzy creature that looked like a cross between a hamster and a disco ball, actually fainted at this point. The facilitator quickly revived it with some sort of smelling salts, all while urging me to continue. Right. So where was I? Oh yeah, the bear. Well, it turns out it wasn't actually a bear. It was something much, much worse. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I swear I saw one alien start writing out its last will and testament. It was my Uncle Bob, dressed up in a bear costume, trying to scare us as a practical joke. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, to my surprise, one of the aliens, a tall, spindly creature with 4 arms and what looked like a permanent scowl, burst out laughing. It was a weird, wheezing sound, like a deflating balloon, mixed with a hyena's cackle. You mean to tell us, the alien gasped between fits of laughter, that on your death world you have creatures so terrifying that your own species dresses up as them to frighten each other, for fun? I nodded, grinning. Oh yeah, we call it entertainment. You should see what we do on Halloween. This set off another round of alien fainting and nervous laughter. The facilitator, looking a bit frazzled, tried to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should move on to a less exciting story. Oh, come on, I protested, really getting into it now. I haven't even told you about the time I got lost in the woods and had to survive on my own for 3 days. The room erupted into chaos. Half the aliens were clamoring to hear more, while the other half were trying to find the nearest exit. The facilitator looked like it was seriously reconsidering its career choices. Very well, it sighed, resigning itself to the madness. Please continue, Jake, but perhaps with a bit less intensity. I grinned, cracking my knuckles. No promises. Now picture this: a 10-year-old kid, alone in the wilderness, armed with nothing but a pocket knife and an overactive imagination. As I launched into my tale of childhood survival, I couldn't help but notice the varying reactions around the room. The small, fuzzy alien that had fainted earlier was now hiding behind its chair, peeking out occasionally with a mixture of terror and fascination. The 4-armed alien who had laughed at my bear story was leaning forward, all 4 of its eyes wide with anticipation. So there I was, I continued, lost in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest. It had started as a simple day hike with my scout troop, but one wrong turn and a moment of distraction later, and I found myself completely alone. A collective shudder ran through the room. The idea of being separated from one's group seemed to be a universal fear. Now, the first rule of being lost is to stay put and wait for rescue. But being a stubborn 10-year-old who had read way too many adventure novels, I decided I was going to find my own way back to civilization. The facilitator interrupted, its voice quavering slightly. "Excuse me, Jake, but are you saying that your species allows juveniles to venture into potentially dangerous wilderness areas?" I couldn't help but chuckle. "Oh, we don't just allow it, we encourage it. It's called character building." The room erupted into a cacophony of disbelief and horror. I waited for it to die down before continuing. Anyway, there I was, armed with nothing but a pocket knife, a half-empty water bottle, and the survival skills I'd learned in Scouts. The first challenge was finding shelter for the night. The four-armed alien leaned in even closer. And how does one accomplish this task in such a hostile environment? "Simple," I replied with a grin. "You make one." I found a fallen tree and used branches and leaves to create a lean-to shelter. It wasn't pretty, but it kept me dry when it started raining in the middle of the night. Rain squeaked a fuzzy alien from behind its chair. "You mean water falls from the sky?" I nodded. "Yep. Sometimes it even freezes and falls as snow or hail." This revelation caused another round of fainting and panicked murmuring. The facilitator was looking more stressed by the minute, but it motioned for me to continue. The next challenge was finding food. Now, I knew better than to eat random berries or mushrooms. That's a quick way to end up dead or hallucinating. But I did remember how to set some basic traps. Traps. The four-armed alien's voice was a mix of horror and admiration. "You mean you hunted other creatures for sustenance?" "Well, hunted might be a bit of an exaggeration," I admitted. "I managed to catch a couple of small fish in a crude basket trap I made. Not exactly a gourmet meal, but it kept me going." The room was dead silent now, every alien hanging on my every word. Even the facilitator seemed to have given up on maintaining order and was listening intently. "The real challenge came on the second day," I continued, lowering my voice for dramatic effect. "That's when I encountered the mountain lion." The reaction was immediate and intense. Several aliens shrieked, one appeared to be praying, and I'm pretty sure I saw one start to molt out of sheer terror. "Now, don't worry," I said quickly, trying not to laugh. "I didn't actually fight the mountain lion or anything. That would be crazy, even for a human kid." The collective sigh of relief was almost comical. "No, what I did was much more in line with actual survival tactics. I made myself look as big as possible, made a lot of noise, and slowly backed away." The mountain lion, thankfully, decided I wasn't worth the trouble and wandered off. The four-armed alien shook its head in disbelief. "So on your world, even the young are trained to face apex predators?" I shrugged. "Well, not formally trained. But we do learn about what to do in those situations. It's just part of growing up in areas where those animals live." This set off another round of excited chatter among the aliens. I caught snippets of conversation about Deathworld survival instincts and juvenile human resilience. The facilitator, seeming to have found its voice again, raised a hand for silence. "Jake, this is quite remarkable. How did your adventure conclude?" I grinned, remembering the end of my little misadventure. "Well, on the third day, I finally heard the search party calling for me. Turns out I'd wandered pretty far off the trail, and they'd been looking for me the whole time. My parents were a mix of relieved and furious when they found me." "And the consequences of your actions," the facilitator pressed, clearly expecting some sort of severe punishment. I laughed. "Oh, I was grounded for a month and had to write a 5-page essay on wilderness safety. But I also got a special badge in my scout troop for survival skills, so it wasn't all bad." The room erupted into chaos once again. Half the aliens seemed to be arguing about the merits of such reckless child-rearing practices, while the other half were pestering me for more details about Earth's wildlife and survival techniques. As the facilitator tried in vain to restore order, I sat back in my chair, thoroughly enjoying the mayhem I'd caused. Who knew that simple childhood camping stories could cause such a stir in interstellar relations? Just as things were starting to calm down, The fuzzy alien that had been hiding behind its chair slowly emerged, its eyes wide with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Excuse me," Jake, it squeaked, "but do all human children have such intense experiences?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh no, not at all. My childhood was pretty tame compared to some. Wait until you hear about the kids who grow up in places like Australia." And just like that, the room descended into chaos once more. As the aliens in the room tried to process the information about Australian wildlife with varying degrees of success, I decided to throw them another curveball. After all, why stop at terrestrial adventures when you can talk about aquatic ones? "You know," I said, raising my voice slightly to be heard over the din, "if you think camping and hiking are intense, wait until you hear about the time I learned to scuba dive." The room fell silent so quickly you could have heard a pin drop. Even the facilitator, who had been trying to restore order, froze mid-gesture. "Scuba dive," the four-armed alien articulated each syllable carefully, as if tasting a new and potentially dangerous food. "What manner of activity is this?" I grinned, settling back in my chair. "Oh, it's just a little hobby where we strap tanks of compressed air to our backs and plunge into the depths of the ocean to explore." The reaction was immediate and spectacular. The fuzzy alien, who had just emerged from behind its chair, promptly dove back into hiding. The four-armed alien's eyes widened to the point where I was genuinely concerned they might pop out of its head. And the facilitator? Well, the facilitator looked like it was seriously reconsidering its career choices. "You voluntarily submerge yourselves in large bodies of water," the question came from a new voice, a bulbous creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a hot air balloon. "Yep," I nodded, trying to keep a straight face. "In fact, we do it for fun. Some people even make a living out of it." The jellyfish balloon made a sound that I can only describe as a mix between a hiccup and a deflating tire. But the pressure, the darkness, the unknown creatures lurking in the depths. I couldn't help but laugh at this point. "Oh, those are the best parts. There's nothing quite like diving into a kelp forest, surrounded by swaying seaweed taller than trees, or exploring a coral reef teeming with colorful fish and bizarre creatures." The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Every alien was staring at me with a mix of horror, disbelief, and was that a hint of envy I detected in some of their eyes? But surely the facilitator interjected, its voice slightly higher pitched than before. "Such activities must be reserved for only the most elite and well-trained of your species." I shook my head, grinning. "Nope. Pretty much anyone can learn to dive. I was 12 when I got my first certification." This revelation caused another uproar. The fuzzy alien peeked out from behind its chair long enough to squeak, "You allow your young to participate in such dangerous activities?" "Allow," I repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Heck, we encourage it. It's a great way to learn about marine ecosystems, develop respect for the ocean, and face your fears." The four-armed alien leaned forward, all four of its eyes blinking rapidly. "And what fears might those be, Jake of Earth?" I paused for a moment, considering. "Well, there's the fear of the unknown for starters. When you're underwater, visibility can be limited. You never know what might be lurking just beyond your field of vision." A collective shudder ran through the room. "Then there's the fear of equipment failure," I continued, warming to my topic. "Your life literally depends on the apparatus strapped to your back. If something goes wrong, you can't just swim to the surface. You have to stay calm, remember your training, and solve the problem underwater." The jellyfish balloon creature was turning an interesting shade of puce. "And you find this enjoyable?" I nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely. There's nothing quite like the thrill of descending into the blue, weightless, surrounded by an alien world teeming with life, and the creatures you encounter. Let me tell you about the time I came face to face with a great white shark." The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Half the aliens in the room looked like they were about to faint, while the other half leaned forward, morbidly fascinated. "Hey, great white shark," the facilitator's voice was barely above a whisper. "Is this some sort of aquatic apex predator?" I grinned, unable to contain my excitement. "Oh yeah. Picture this: a streamlined killing machine, up to 20 feet long, with multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth. They're basically the perfect predator, virtually unchanged for millions of years." The room erupted into pandemonium. The fuzzy alien had curled into a tight ball, rocking back and forth. The four-armed alien was scribbling notes furiously, muttering something about Deathworld aquatic terrors and the jellyfish balloon. Well, it looked like it was seriously considering a career change to something less stressful, like bomb disposal or tightrope walking over active volcanoes. But wait, I said, raising my voice to be heard over the chaos, that's not even the craziest part. Some humans actually seek out these creatures. We have specially designed cages that we lower into the water, and people pay good money to come face to face with these apex predators. The silence that followed this statement was so profound I could have sworn I heard the collective sound of alien minds being blown. You, the facilitator, seemed to be struggling to form words. You intentionally place yourselves in close proximity to these monsters, for recreation. I nodded, trying and failing to suppress a grin. Yep, we call it shark cage diving. It's quite popular in certain parts of the world. The four-armed alien, who had been furiously taking notes this entire time, suddenly spoke up. Jake of Earth, I must ask, is there any aquatic environment on your planet that your species has not attempted to explore or interact with? I pondered this for a moment. Well, we haven't reached the very bottom of the Mariana Trench yet. That's the deepest known part of our oceans. But we're working on it, I replied with a grin. The four-armed alien's jaw dropped. Literally. I watched in fascination as its lower mandible unhinged and fell to its chest. You mean to tell us, it said, voice muffled by its displaced jaw, that your species isn't satisfied with merely swimming with apex predators and exploring the shallows. You actively seek to delve into the most inhospitable depths of your world's oceans. I nodded enthusiastically. Oh yeah, we've got specially designed submersibles that can withstand the crushing pressure. It's pretty amazing, actually. Down there, we've discovered creatures that look like they're straight out of a science fiction movie. The jellyfish balloon creature, which had been slowly reinflating itself, suddenly deflated again with an audible whoosh. Creatures. There is life in these abyssal depths. Absolutely, I exclaimed, warming to my subject. We've found fish with transparent heads, giant isopods the size of house cats, and even an octopus that looks like it's wearing Dumbo ears. It's a whole other world down there. The room fell into a stunned silence. Even the facilitator seemed at a loss for words. Finally, the fuzzy alien, which had uncurled slightly from its ball, squeaked out a question. But why? Why do you humans insist on exploring such dangerous places? I paused, considering the question. It was a good one, after all. Why did we humans have this insatiable urge to push boundaries and explore the unknown? You know. I began slowly. I think it's just part of who we are as a species. We've always been explorers, always pushing the boundaries of what's possible. It's not just about the thrill or the danger, though I won't lie. That's part of it for some people. It's about discovery, about understanding our world better. The four-armed alien, having finally managed to reattach its jaw, leaned forward. But surely, with all the technology at your disposal, you could explore these places remotely. Why risk your fragile organic forms? I couldn't help but laugh at that. Fragile? Us. I think you might be underestimating humans a bit there. But to answer your question, sure, we use remote technology when we can. But there's something different about being there in person. About seeing things with your own eyes and feeling the environment around you. It's hard to explain if you haven't experienced it. The facilitator, seemingly having regained its composure, cleared its throat or whatever passed for a throat in its species. This is most illuminating, Jake. But perhaps we should move on to some of your calmer childhood experiences. Surely not all human children engage in such extreme activities. I grinned, an idea forming in my mind. Oh, of course not. How about I tell you about some of our childhood games instead? Ever heard of dodgeball? The aliens visibly relaxed, clearly relieved at the prospect of hearing about something as innocuous as children's games. Little did they know what they were in for. So, dodgeball, I began, trying to keep a straight face. It's a simple game, really. You divide into two teams, each on one side of a court. Then you throw balls at each other as hard as you can. If you get hit, you're out. The room, which had just started to calm down, erupted into chaos once more. You deliberately throw projectiles at your the jellyfish balloon creature looked like it was about to faint. Oh yeah, I nodded, warming to my topic. And that's just one game. Wait until you hear about Red Rover, or better yet, full-contact sports like rugby or American football. The facilitator, looking decidedly frazzled at this point, raised all four of its hands in a placating gesture. Perhaps we should take a short recess. 2. Process this information. As the aliens filed out of the room, some still shaking their heads in disbelief, others furiously taking notes, I couldn't help but chuckle to myself. If they thought dodgeball was intense, wait until they heard about extreme sports. Bungee jumping? Anyone? After the recess, which lasted considerably longer than initially planned apparently, several of the alien representatives needed time for meditation, prayer, or in one case, a quick molt to calm their nerves. We reconvened in the meeting room. The atmosphere was tense, to say the least. I could practically feel the anticipation radiating off my alien counterparts as they waited for the next shocking revelation about human childhood. The facilitator, looking slightly more composed but still a bit frazzled around the edges, cleared its throat. Now then, shall we continue our cultural exchange? Perhaps one of our other representatives would like to share a childhood experience. The silence that followed was so profound you could have heard a pin drop on Pluto. Not a single alien volunteered. Instead, all eyes and other sensory organs were fixed firmly on me. I couldn't help but grin. What, no takers? Come on, I'm sure you all have some interesting stories to share. No childhood scrapes or misadventures. The fuzzy alien, which had taken up a permanent residence behind its chair, peeked out cautiously. We do not typically encourage our young to engage in potentially dangerous activities, it squeaked. Really, I asked, genuinely curious. Then, how do your kids learn to assess and handle risks? The four-armed alien, which had been furiously scribbling notes this entire time, looked up from its datapad. Risk assessment? For juveniles? Is this a common practice among humans? I nodded, warming to the topic. Oh yeah, it's a crucial part of growing up. We believe that controlled exposure to risk helps kids develop confidence, resilience, and problem-solving skills. The room erupted into a flurry of murmurs and rapid blinking, which I was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of raised eyebrows. But what about safety? The jellyfish balloon creature had inflated slightly, bobbing with agitation. Surely the primary concern is to keep the young safe at all times. I couldn't help but chuckle. Safe? Sure, that's important. But we also believe in preparing our kids for the real world. And let's face it, the real world isn't always safe. The facilitator, looking increasingly like it was regretting its career choices, tentatively raised a hand. Perhaps you could elaborate on this philosophy, Jake? How exactly do humans balance safety with this risk exposure? I leaned back in my chair, considering the question. Well, it's all about calculated risks, really. We don't just throw our kids into danger willy-nilly. We teach them to assess situations, to understand their own capabilities, and to make informed decisions. And how does this manifest in your childhood activities? The four-armed alien was poised to take more notes, all four of its eyes focused intently on me. Oh, in all sorts of ways, I replied, grinning as I remembered some of my own childhood adventures. Take tree climbing, for instance. It's a pretty common activity for human kids, at least in areas with suitable trees. The fuzzy alien let out a small squeak of alarm. You allow your young to ascend vegetation. At height. I nodded, trying not to laugh at the look of horror on the alien's furry face. Yep, it's great for developing strength, balance, and spatial awareness. Plus, it's just plain fun. Yes, but what if they fall? The jellyfish balloon was rapidly changing colors, cycling through what I assumed was its species equivalent of a panic attack. Well, that's part of the learning experience, I explained. Kids start with lower branches, learn how to test if a branch can hold their weight, how to position their body for balance. Sure, sometimes they fall and get a few scrapes or bruises, but that's how they learn their limits and improve their skills. The room had fallen into a stunned silence. I could almost see the gears turning in their alien minds as they tried to process this information. This is most unusual, the facilitator finally managed to say. In most of our cultures, the focus is on providing a completely safe environment for our young, free from any potential harm. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow at that. Really? And how does that work out when they become adults and have to face real-world challenges? The question seemed to stump the aliens. They looked at each other, blinking rapidly and making small gestures that I couldn't interpret. I I suppose we hadn't considered that aspect, the four-armed alien admitted after a moment. Our focus has always been on protection rather than preparation. Don't get me wrong, I said, holding up my hands in a placating gesture. We're big on protection too, but we also believe in giving our kids the tools to protect themselves. It's like the old saying goes, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. The jellyfish balloon looked confused. I thought we were discussing risk assessment, not aquatic creature harvesting. I couldn't help but laugh. It's just an expression. The point is, we believe in teaching our kids how to handle challenges rather than just shielding them from everything. The room fell into thoughtful silence as the aliens pondered this concept. I could almost see the wheels turning in their heads, or whatever passed for heads in their respective anatomies. Finally, the facilitator spoke up. This is a most intriguing perspective, Jake. Perhaps you could provide us with more examples of how this philosophy is applied in human child rearing. I grinned, cracking my knuckles. Oh, I've got plenty of examples. Ever heard of a little thing called learning to ride a bike? The collective groan that went up from the alien representatives told me this was going to be another long, entertaining session. As I launched into my explanation of the time-honored human tradition of strapping our children to two-wheeled vehicles and letting them loose, I couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, we humans were tougher than we gave ourselves credit for. After all, if our childhood games and activities were enough to send a room full of advanced alien species into a panic, what did that say about our species as a whole? As I watched the jellyfish balloon slowly deflate in horror at my description of training wheels and skinned knees, I made a mental note: if I ever got the chance to visit any of their home planets, I was definitely bringing a bike, and maybe a skateboard. You know, for diplomacy's sake. The facilitator, looking like it was seriously considering early retirement, weakly waved a hand for me to continue. And so, with a grin that would have made the Cheshire Cat proud, I dove into the wild world of human childhood, one hair-raising tale at a time. Who knew that being a Deathworlder could be so much fun?